Our BMW SimCup race was this close to being flushed straight down the toilet, but we still managed to make it through and get a decent result at the end. Here's how. So my teammate Danny managed to qualify us in P5 for this short 2-hour race around Road America, which by the way is absolutely chaos. We start in P5 and we come down to turn 1. You can see already here one of the cars ahead of us have a half spin. It doesn't hit a wall or anything, so it's able to keep on going, but at this point it's already out of the race. Now coming down to turn 5, we have one of the Williams cars who's trying to make a move on us, but then he goes defensive and managed to defend the position. Is that how you say it? But sadly enough, the next corner, Danny has a typical experience of the cold tires. You can see he has to counter steer, kind of save the car because he's gone with a little bit too much speed, which allows the Williams car to go through. A couple of laps go by where the race is kind of settled, not a lot happens, and this is where we go into World War I, the first round of traffic. You can see we start out with some quite chill moves, just down the middle, 3 wide with a couple of GT cars down the back straight. Now the difference here is that when you're driving, this is not necessarily a bad move to make because you feel like you have the control, but when you're sitting there watching, you have absolutely no control over the car where you're supposed to go or anything. So we come through the traffic onto lap 7, pass on the grass for these 2 GT cars, and coming out of turn 3, this is where it's really close to going wrong. You can see Danny basically gets stuck behind 2 GT cars who are not really willing to leave any space anywhere until like halfway down the straight. So Danny has to lift off. One of the Urano cars, actually 2 of the Urano cars, is coming up right behind him, which just makes the whole situation extremely chaotic. You can see we almost run into the GT car in front and he almost gets punted off by the GT car behind, but eventually a little gap between the 2 GT cars right in front appear. He slips through, almost touches the Urano LMDH car. So that's about, what, 3 close moments just in that one incident. This is an extremely close moment, and that's what really makes me love endurance racing. Now, there are multiple other close moments in this race, so make sure you watch to the end of the video. The First World War has kind of settled. We've gone through the first round of traffic, and you can see one of the Urano cars goes for a move down the inside. Now, Danny manages to keep up somewhat well, but the Urano car actually ends up gapping him, and as we come into World War II, the second round of traffic, you can see the Urano car actually has some really bad luck here, which allows us to catch back up to the back of it and be able to kind of put the hook on it again and see if we can get a second chance, if we can say it like that. Anyways, we go into the Third World War. This is where the nukes are about to come down. As you can see, we have a moment here. We're looking from our sister car, the other Apex car. We have one of the Williams cars, one of the BS cars, and the carousel tried to go 3 wide with one of the GT cars. Now, I feel like this incident is sort of hard to judge. In my opinion, it's probably more the Williams car's fault because it's trying to go around the outside and ends up making contact with the BS car. But on the other side, the BS car could have also backed out. They could have both backed out in this one. I would like to hear your opinion on whose fault you think it is, so comment that down below. Nonetheless, this is fine for us because we end up gaining 2 free positions on it. And as we come into the first pit stop, I believe we're on P4. And you can see coming into the pit lane, one of the other Urano cars has managed to get on the back of us. This is not the same one as before. And on the exit of the pit lane, he actually ends up jumping us, which sucks a bit. I don't really know if they fueled less or what happened there, but they end up jumping us, which puts us to P5. Anyways, Danny pulls out his fishing rod again, throws a hook onto him and tries to follow him. And now meanwhile, 1 lap after we actually exit the pits, we have the other Apex car, which is Owen and Paddy, and Owen driving at this point, which actually ends up crashing out of the race. Now this was a bit of a miscommunication between the GT car. Now even though this does gain us a position, it's never nice to see one of your teammates crash out because first of all, we could have worked together later on in the race, and also you know the amount of effort that's kind of been put into the practice, and all of that effort just disappears in a split second. Now really this just sucks also because we've been practicing together all week, you know, working on the setup, working on the stuff together. And this ends up happening, which is just really sad, but it's racing sometimes. Now, of course, we try to keep our head up because it's still a long race, but it's not really like that epic when the other car crashes out, you get overtaken due to shit traffic, and you have another BS car coming right up on the back of you. But you know, it's racing, you have to fight through it. Now at this point we have 2 Urano cars right in front of us who can just work together. First of all, they're really fast, and second of all, they have each other, so they can kind of slipstream of each other, help each other to just try and pull away from us. So we're kind of put in a hard situation here, but then he does a somewhat decent job of keeping up with at least with the second one of the Urano cars. Meanwhile, right behind us, we've got one of the BS cars coming up on us, and you can see we run into some bad traffic once again, which allows him to have a little bit more overspeed coming into this corner. He goes for the outside, outside move. And I don't really know what to say about this incident. I mean, there was space. He didn't leave a lot of space there, but also then he slightly missed his apex. I think that's a hard incident to really talk about because I don't really know who's at fault. Certainly also an optimistic move, going for the outside of that corner. Now it's time for the second stop of the race, and it's time for me to jump in the car. You can see we're behind one of the Urano cars on the entry of the pit, and we're also behind the same Urano car on the exit. So my goal is just once again to pull out the fishing rod. So now it's just time for me to pull out the fishing rod, throw a hook on him and just try and follow him through, because that's eventually gonna be a P3 podium position, which you'll see in a moment why. Coming out of the pits on the first couple of laps, we managed to quite quickly catch up to P3 at the moment. You can see the Urano car gets past it, and we kind of realize that it's kind of down on pace with its second driver. So the Urano car gets past it, and about half a lap or 2-3 corners later, we also managed to get past it. Now this is really important because we want to follow through with the Urano car and try and just keep up with that car. So we get past it pretty quickly, and the Williams car that we also have right behind us also gets past it pretty quickly. So we're like in a pretty close train here for what's gonna be third place now. I managed to somewhat keep up with it well until I kind of make a little mistake into the traffic here. It just ends up losing us like a couple of tenths, which drops us out of the slipstream. You know, it sucks, what can I say? Now, I was mainly focused on trying to keep up with the Urano car in front, but kind of after this, it starts dropping us a little bit. We have the Williams car still behind us to worry about. You can see I tried to break the draft a bit, and we actually end up pulling a bit of a gap on the Williams car. Now, he drops off a bit, and eventually the BS car catches up to the back of him and goes for this move, which, by the way, is an absolutely crazy one. You can see he decides to throw it down the middle where there's not really a gap between the Williams car and one of the Urano GT3 cars. This ends up putting one of the Urano GT3 cars in the wall, but he manages to get through, and he's now chasing us down instead of chasing down the Williams car. And actually, just a lap after that, I run into some really bad traffic, which allows him to get right up onto the bumper of me. So I think at this point we're running with about 5 laps to go or so in the race, and we've got to fend off this BS car while still lapping traffic, because at this point the field had kind of spread out, so there was constantly traffic. You can see there was potential in a move right here, but I ended up blocking up the whole track, so we couldn't really overtake. And a bit more traffic here on the last corner. You know, it was quite intense, to be honest, because we didn't quite know if the BS car behind us was going to get a penalty for that move or anything. So we just had to make sure that we still defended the position, and to make sure that if he didn't get a penalty, that we would still get the position. And eventually we end up crossing the line in P4 for BMW Sim Cup, which is not a bad result. Or of course a podium would have been really nice, but P4 is not terrible. Now, if you want to see these races live, I do stream them over on Twitch. There's a link in the description, so make sure you come join me there. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.